Good day, everyone. Today I'll show you how to set up Laravel with Angular. So I usually use Laravel and Angular in my projects. So Laravel for backend as an API, then Angular for the front end. First, I'm going to show you the versions that I have. So for PHP, I'm using PHP 8.2. Then for installing Laravel, we're going to need Composer. So I'm using Composer 2.3. Then for Angular, we'll be needing a Node.js, and I'm using Node version 16 and NPM version 8. Okay, so let's get started. First, we're gonna try to install Laravel, or rather create a Laravel project using Composer. So I've, um, I've CD to the desktop, and I'm going to create a Laravel project here on the desktop. So to create, you can also find this command on the Laravel website under documentation. So I'm gonna name it test API. Okay. So we've created a Laravel project. Now I'm going to try to open it on my IDE. Okay. So once you created the project, you'll have a setup like this. So for my IDE, I'm using PHP Storm, but you can use any editor that you like. You'll have the app directory where you'll configure. Later, we're gonna put all our code for the API. So the main directories that you'll have to worry here is the app, the config. If later we'll be configuring something, and the database in case you set up a database. Then the routes. So since we're only concerned about API, so we're just going to be using the API.php route. First thing that you need to configure on your API is the env file. So usually the env file isn't included in the, if you're using the a Git or a version control like Git, that env file isn't included, so that's why there's a .env.example. You usually just rename this into an env file. But if you're creating a new project, then you don't have to worry because it's included by default. Right now, we don't have to configure anything here. We just have to see that it's running. So to run this, just cd to the project folder, serve. Then you can check it on the browser by going to localhost 8000 command. So if you see this page, then that means that Laravel is working. Then we try to install Angular. I've created a new tab on my terminal, still on the desktop. By the way, you can put these projects anywhere you like. So for me, for easier access, I'm putting it on the desktop. And to install Angular, first we need to install the Angular CLI so that we can create a new Angular project. So to install the Angular CLI, you just have to run the command npm install g angular/CLI. This. We just have to wait for it to finish. Okay. For now, just ignore the warnings. This is probably because I have another Angular CLI installed, so I'm gonna uninstall it first. Okay. Okay. Then I'm gonna try to install it again. Right. So once this Angular CLI is installed, you can now use the command ng-new, which will create a new Angular project. So I'm gonna name it test client. Oh, hang on. So when I opened a new terminal tab, it actually reverted back to my default node version. I have multiple node versions installed. So we're gonna use 16.13. Do that. Okay. So that was probably why there were warnings. Okay. So we're gonna create the Angular project. I'm gonna name it test client. So for me, I like using Angular routing, so I'm gonna say yes here. and I will use CSS for styling. So this may take a while. It's installing the packages needed by Angular. In the meantime, I'll try to open it on my IDE. Okay, so there's going to be a node modules here afterwards, but right now this is the bare folder structure of an Angular project. So an app module is created for you once you create it. So these errors are probably because the oh, okay. So it was because the setup wasn't finished yet. Okay, so this warning is just because of Git, because right now we're on master branch, but there was a change in Git for instead of master, we should use the main branch as the name, but just ignore it for now. Okay, so now we have this Angular app. We're gonna try to run it and see if it's working. So you cd to the test client. Then to run it, we run the command ngserve. It's gonna build the app. Okay, once it's finished, you can access it using localhost 4200. And now we have this sample page. Okay. So we have set up, we have both installed Laravel and Angular, but what we actually need is we need to connect them, get data from the API to the client. So to do that, we have first, let's create a sample controller here on Angular, I mean on Laravel. Okay, so you can actually create a new file or you can use the Laravel command to create a controller. So we can say PHP artisan controller. You can say home, or let's do something. Let's say a to-do controller. Then we're gonna create in a later tutorial. I could create a to-do CRUD operation. But for now, let's do this. So adding the dash dash API option would generate certain functions on the controller that are important in creating APIs. So we make this one. Okay, so these are the functions that I was talking about. So there's index, store, show, update, and destroy. So these are the default functions of an API in Laravel. So this is a corresponding route for each of them. But to set up the route, there's also a shortcut in Laravel. So you could just say route API resource and then set the name of the route. So we're gonna say to do. Then we have to set the class. You can do this, put the entire import here, but you can also just replace it with an actual import here above. And then just call the class here. Okay. So right now we don't have anything here. But we need to send something to the client. So I'm gonna create a dummy array here of to-dos. C. So these are sample to-dos. Then we're gonna return it as a JSON response. Add the status number. Now, without connecting it to the client, we can actually check if this is working by using either the browser or a third-party software like Postman. But here, we could actually see. So the get function for to-dos, here we can check that it's working. So we were able to get the array of to-dos from the backend. Now we have to get it from the client. So I'm gonna create another module in Angular called to-dos. So this is how I usually name my Angular classes. Then I create a component for it. A template, or in this case, it's a page. Okay, then import it in a module. Okay. Now what we need to do is just to add it to the routing here, so that when we go to to-dos, it's gonna go through the to-do component. Okay, you just have to import to-do module here. Then one thing that we need, since we'll be accessing the API on the back end, we're gonna need to import HTTP client module to access the HTTP client. So let's see if this page works. We're gonna go to the to-dos link. So as you can see, after I edited it, automatically rebuild and refresh. So here we have the to-do list. Actually, just remove the unnecessary content here. We just need the router outlet. Okay, so we're on the to-do list page. Now what we need is to access the backend. I usually create a service for this. So an injectable, so it can be injected on the component later. Okay. Create a constructor, import the HTTP client. So HTTP client is what we're going to use to access the to-do. So for getting all the to-dos, we're going to create an all function. I usually create an API URL. So when we access the HTTP client using the get, we say API URL / to-do. So we'll return it, so we have to subscribe on it later. Now this is our service for accessing the backend. Then to use it on the component, we just have to inject here on the constructor to the service. But make sure to add it as a provider here on your module. Since we're using it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna implement, there's an init interface in Angular where a function is called when a component is initialized. So this is how you do it. Now on init, I'm going to call the service to get all the to-dos, which is an array of string. Okay, so it doesn't match. Let's just put any for now. Then, so we'll know that it has worked. We'll just create a variable to contain it and display it on the front end. Okay, so on initialization of this component, we get it from the backend, add it to the variable, then display it here. So we're going to use ng4. Okay. This should display all the to do in a list. And, let's see. We refresh. Okay. So as you can see, it went through the back end. Now the way to see if it actually went through the back end is by using the Google Chrome Developer Console. When we refresh this, it's actually gonna show you that there was one request that went to the back end here, 8,000, and it returned this one. So this confirms that the Laravel and the Angular now is connected with each other. Thank you for watching. Watch out for more videos later. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye.